Hey, how's it going everyone? I'm White Pointer, and welcome to the next part of my series of videos that are covering mature themed SNES games. First, I looked at games that had blood and gore, then my previous video covered games which had a horror theme that saw an English release on the Super Nintendo. In this video, I'll be taking a look at horror games on the Japanese version of the console, the Super Famicom. Obviously, any games I cover in my previous videos won't appear again here. Alright, let's get right into it. I'll start this video off with a game I didn't realise actually did receive an English release on the Super Nintendo, so I derped and didn't cover it in my previous video when I should have, so I'll cover it here. Musya, the classic Japanese tale of horror. This was an early release for the console and is apparently based on an ancient Japanese legend. You play as Imoto, a pikeman that is the sole survivor of a great battle, who is then told by some spirits that he needs to descend into the abyss to rescue a maiden who holds the talisman that seals the evil one, because she's been abducted by one of his soldiers. So off you go into the abyss. Imoto can stab with his pike, which can also be powered up to shoot projectiles, and he can also spin it around to protect himself at the cost of being able to move. This game has a pretty interesting style, and as you can see, there's plenty of freaky looking monsters and demons to fight. You can tell this is an early effort though, because the controls feel rather stiff and clunky, and the music, while okay, doesn't fit all that well. It seems to be trying to emulate the classic Castlevania formula, but doesn't quite reach it. It's decent without being spectacular, so it might be worth a look. Once again, this was not Japanese exclusive, I'm just including it here because I overlooked it in my previous video. Okay, so now onto some real Super Famicom exclusives, and the first of these is possibly the most famous horror game on the platform, Clock Tower. The game has unfortunately never been officially released outside of Japan, but like most of the other games I'll be covering in this video, there is a community-made English patch that exists. It spawned a series of sequels and remakes, but this is the original. This is a point-and-click adventure game, and one of the earliest examples of survival horror. You play as Jennifer Simpson as you navigate around a huge mansion trying to investigate what happened to her adoptive mother and missing adopted sisters, while you're being pursued by a deranged boy with a giant pair of scissors, otherwise known as Scissor Man. He can pop up pretty much anywhere and you have no weapons to fight him and can only run and hide and hope he doesn't find you. If you liked Alien Isolation, you'll probably really dig this. The atmosphere is unnerving, a result achieved in no small part by the fantastic sound design. The story is intriguing, while Jennifer uncovers the secrets of the mansion, and different characters can live or die based on the player's actions, resulting in 9 possible different endings, which is pretty impressive. While some might find Clock Tower a bit slow paced and lacking a bit in gameplay depth, it absolutely makes up for that by delivering an experience that's totally unique and full of dread. There's honestly nothing else quite like it on the console. The next game is another that is a very unique experience on the Super Famicom, and that is LaPlace No Ma, or LaPlace's Demon. This is a turn-based RPG with horror elements, where you need to explore an old haunted house to search for some children that went missing. There's always children that go missing in haunted houses. You choose a class for your main character, and can then choose up to 3 other party members to cover most of the remaining classes, and each class has its own unique traits that make them valuable in their own way. The idea is to search the mansion and examine everything you can in order to open up new rooms to explore and progress the story. This game uses random turn-based battles that were a pretty common format at the time, which does mean it can drag and get a bit grindy and frustrating at times, but the good news is that you don't need to fight battles for experience, and instead can get experience by completing quests. You can leave the mansion at basically any time to return to town to restock on supplies, heal injured or perished party members, or talk to NPCs. The story is the real strong point here. It's really well told, and the creepy horror theme remains consistent throughout the adventure. There's a high quality unofficial English patch available, so you should definitely go ahead and give this one a go. Though make sure you find patch version 2.0, as the original translation was unfortunately rushed and had a lot of problems, which are fixed in 2.0. If you like some really messed up demonic horror imagery, then look no further than Majyuuou, or King of Demons. This is a side-scrolling action game that's also honestly pretty tough and takes a few pages out of Castlevania's book. You play as Abel, whose wife is killed in order to resurrect the King of Demons, and his daughter is next on a sacrificial altar unless he can stop it. The spirit of his wife joins him as a fairy, and well, that's it. That's the story. There isn't really any kind of explanation as to who Abel is, or why he's in this demon realm, or hell, or whatever it's supposed to be, but I guess that's not really the point. You start the game in human form with a gun, but as you progress the game and beat bosses, you'll get the chance to pick up a jewel that can change you into one of 3 different demon forms that grant you specific powers. You can choose to keep leveling up one form to become more powerful, or switch between the different forms, and if you use all 3 forms, you'll gain a new super powerful 4th form, which is required for the good ending. As you can see, the enemies and bosses here all look grotesque and super freaky, and some of them are massive too. Even the imagery on the box art is pretty messed up. It's not hard to understand why Nintendo of America might have had a problem with this game, but there's such a minimal amount of text it does make you wonder why it was never released in other regions, and original cartridges for this are now hella expensive. There's an English patch available for it, if you're really set on it, but it's not necessary. Majyuuou is definitely worth experiencing. I'm going to go a bit left field for this next one and include Jaki Crush. This is the 3rd game in the Crush Pinball franchise, the first game to be released on a Nintendo platform, and also the first to be, unfortunately, Japanese exclusive. If you're familiar with this series of pinball games, you'll know what to expect here. There's a main table that has multiple player areas, each with their own set of flippers and objectives, hordes of smaller monsters you can destroy that act kind of like moving drop targets, and some dynamically changing areas of the table, such as the big demonic head in the middle. Like the other games in the series, you can unlock very smaller bonus tables that usually had some objective to destroy a big demon or lots of smaller ones, and these could be accessed after completing specific criteria, but could also occasionally be triggered by random chance whenever you hit a sinkhole. As you can see, this game is themed after Japanese demon and evil spirit mythology, so it contains a lot of that kind of imagery, especially in the bonus tables. Pinball might not be the first thing that pops into your head when it comes to this subject, but I definitely think Jaki Crush qualifies, and it's a really good game too. Even if you don't normally like pinball, you should give it a go. I wanted to cover the Shin Megami Tensei games in this video, even though they're not strictly horror in the true sense, but still have a lot of dark themes about them that are commonly associated with horror. The Shin Megami Tensei series started on the Super Famicom, and there's 3 games actually: Shin Megami Tensei, Shin Megami Tensei 2, and Shin Megami Tensei If. I sat on this for a really long time though, unsure of what I could say that would be adequate while fitting into a couple of minutes. Shin Megami Tensei is a follow-up to the Megami Tensei series that were on the NES, and they all have the same kind of basic gameplay elements. These are dungeon crawlers played from a first-person view, though the first 2 games also have an overworld map you can traverse between each location. The notable mechanic of these games is the ability to recruit demons to fight for you in your party, then fuse them together into more powerful demons once they become too weak to fight, as they don't level up as you do. In a way, Pokemon would later borrow and adapt this idea of capturing monsters to battle for you, just in a more kid-friendly fashion. They're quite deep, with a lot of different items and spells to keep track of, and complex stories with a lot of characters to remember. The first 2 games in particular are also pretty long, and may take over 40 hours to complete a single playthrough. The main draw of these games are the stories, and this is where the dark and gritty horror-like elements come in. You align yourself with one of a number of paths, namely law, chaos, or neutral, which affects how the plot plays out. There's some disturbing imagery throughout, such as humans being sacrificed or eaten by demons, and the stories are firmly anchored in religious references too. They are your pretty typical JRPGs for the time, so be prepared for a lot of random battles. The well-known Persona series spawned as a spin-off from these games on the Super Famicom. The 3rd game, Shin Megami Tensei If to be specific, so if you're a fan of that series, then it may be worth going back to check these out to see where it all started. There's a lot of text here, but the English translation patches do a really good job. Persona isn't the only series that started as a spin-off from Shin Megami Tensei. There were a number of others, some of which had entries on the Super Famicom, but neither of them are what you'd call horror games, just fantasy games really, without the dark themes or tense atmosphere, so I won't be covering them in any further depth in this video. Alright, let's dive into something even more obscure than what we had previously looked at, with not just one, but a bunch of visual novels, or sound novels as this specific type were commonly called, that were released for the Super Famicom, all essentially a kind of choose-your-own-adventure survival horror story. Unfortunately, there are no English patches for any of these that I'm aware of, although there are some resources out there that provide translations for at least some of the possible paths for a few of them. But regardless, if you're like me and you don't read Japanese, you'll probably have a difficult time understanding what's going on in any of these. I admit that visual novels aren't really my thing, but if you're into them and you know how to read Japanese, they might be worth tracking down. You're gonna have to forgive me if I totally botch the pronunciation of some of these, sorry in advance. The first I'll mention is Otogiriso, or St. John's Wort, which is a real-life yellow flower. This is one of the first titles in this genre, and follows the story of a couple that crash their car in the forest and find an old mansion surrounded by the titular yellow flowers. Of course, the mansion seems to be haunted. This one even got adapted into a movie. Then you have Kamaitachi no Yoru, or Night of the Sickle Weasel. This was the first game to use digitized photos of locations and place silhouettes of people on top of them. It follows the story of a couple that go to a ski lodge, but murders start happening and they need to piece together what is going on before more people die, which can include them. This got adapted into a TV miniseries. Two more games that had a similar kind of presentation with character silhouettes are Zakuro no Aji, or Taste of Pomegranate, and Getsumen no Anubis, or Anubis on the Moon's Surface. The former depicts the events of an office building sinking into the ground and the survivors encountering zombies as they try to escape. The latter is set on the moon base, where things start going awry when one of the crew gets infected with some kind of alien parasite. Another similar style game to these, but without the silhouettes, is Yakouchuu, which translates to the name of a phosphorus sea organism. This one is set on the boat, where people start being murdered. Next I'll talk about Majotachi no Nemuri, which translates to the Sleepless Witches. This one, to me anyway, sounds like the most interesting concept of all of these games. It follows the story of Toshio Suda, who travels to a village to mourn the death of his childhood friend. He sees a vision of his deceased friend and crashes his car, but eventually makes it to the village with the help of a young woman. When he's in the village though, he finds more than he was expecting, as a strange and secretive group of vampires called the Valley People have been causing trouble and may be linked to his friend's death. Finally, there are two games with pretty unique presentations. The first is Gakkou de atta Kowai Hanashi, which translates to Schoolhouse Horror Story. This uses digitized photos of actors and locations. You're given the task to speak to around half a dozen different people that all tell their own spooky stories about mysteries that happened in a creepy school building that's due to be demolished, so you can write about them for your school newspaper. However, we soon find out the school is haunted and filled with many dangers, both of the supernatural and natural varieties. Following that, there is Tsukikomori, which translates to something like The Last Day of the Month. It's made by the same team that did Schoolhouse Horror Story that we just looked at, and features the same gameplay and presentation, but it's not a direct sequel. The plot of this one involves a family meeting together after their grandmother passes away, and follows the same basic idea of listening to each of their scary stories. Phew, okay. I'll finish this video off with an honourable mention in Ghost Whip Mikami Joreishi wa Nice Body. As you can see, this game looks bright and colourful due to being based on an anime series that itself was based on a manga, which was kind of like the Japanese version of Ghostbusters with an attractive female lead. As a result, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's not particularly scary, nor is it trying to be, but like Ghostbusters, it can still throw some freaky stuff in. There doesn't seem to be an English patch for this yet, but apparently a full translation has been completed and just needs to be inserted into the game, so hopefully one will be available in the not too distant future. It's a solid and well made action platform regardless though, so check it out if it looks interesting to you. So that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the final video I'll be doing in this series, which will tackle games with other kinds of mature content. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.